All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is Rob here at Smirking Gun, and we are continuing our video series revisiting the show DEVS that came out in 2020 that was written and created and directed by Alex Garland, the writer of books and film, including The Beach, 28 Days Later, this show, Civil War, Annihilation, Men. There's one I always forget. Why do I always forget that? It'll pop up to me in the middle of the night like a nightmare. But he's just got such a unique take on things, and I am really happy that we are doing this. And if you're happy that we're doing this and you're liking what we're doing here, bell, notifications, subscribe, like, all that stuff. A couple of things before we get into this episode. First off, this is a really interesting way to do a flashback episode where you've got Katie using DEVS to look back on how things went in people's lives in the past, how they got to, a little bit of their backstory. We don't see Kenton's, which is interesting. Maybe it's because she doesn't consider him important to the story. But it also lets us do it in a really unique way. Not just because we're seeing it from the way that the quantum computer makes it look, but also using it as a way to show the multiversal aspect of this series, which is like how many different, doing the deterministic route that worked, that the one that Forrest doesn't like to use, showed like clean images, clean audio of things from the past, but they are not from our past, they're from a past. And leaning into the multiversal theory, that's what this episode leans hard into, showing us all different ways that something could have happened, but not in some over the top way. It's just a moment, and that's how it's going to start. But I also wanted to say at the top, some of the things that I noticed that I say, different phrases that I say that I wish I didn't use, and I'm going to try to use less often, kind of makes sense, especially since we're talking about, Lily's in an institution, a psychiatric, being held for involuntary psychiatric evaluation after what has been going on, partially because of her choices to how she wanted to handle getting into Kenton's computer, how she wanted to handle finding out more about Sergei's death. Those were her choices. Now that's not, and that's really kind of one of the things that's at the heart of this, is either everything is going to happen the way it's going to happen, or we had choice. And that comes up near the end of the episode. And I like to think that that's when we talked about time being basically everything happening at once, and that I'm alive and dead and pre-existed all happening at the same time. And that might be true, but I don't think it's a predetermined world. I think your choices do that, where you're going to end up. But they also bring up, that everything that happens creates everything else that'll happen, all the other ways that it could have gone, which is what they think is basically saying that everything we do and think and feel basically branches off into a different possibility. And I've always loved this kind of thing, even though, again, it's been used in television and movies now as more of a gimmick to basically, break every rule that you want for like characters and universes and worlds. And hey, on this world, everybody's a lobster, but they're still who they are. So you've got like Captain America as a lobster. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I wanted to bring up terms that I would use, like crazy and stupid, things like that are just these broad terms that are too they're just not accurate, and they're lazy ways of talking. When you just like when you can't like when somebody acts bizarre, you go, well, that person's acting crazy, or something that you're just not used to happening. Well, that was pretty crazy. Or just saying, like everybody's stupid, and it's like, no, of course not everybody's stupid. But I hate when I look at those terms. I'm going to try to start using better terminology. I know I use pretty decent terminology most of the time, but like I think we get stuck in those modes of just let's hit the easy button. What's the easiest word to say here? Crazy, stupid. And so that's just what comes out of my mouth, our mouths. But I'm talking about myself right now. And again, this is my usual way of talking on my videos. But this cold open that we do get, right, is what I'm talking about exactly. At first, I didn't know what they were going for. I thought, again, he's just being artsy, but I love it when shows get like this kind of clever with how they shoot things and frame scenes and frame people within scenes and making it look like different times of their lives that are happening in the scene at the same time. So it's like we start, right, and we bookend this too, where it's Lily in the hospital and we see the get well soon bouquet from Kenton, which, I mean, it means that he sent it like immediately, or he could have even went to the gift shop and said, like, bring this up to her room like immediately. Like, so it'd be there waiting for her, as like, it's not, the thing is, get well soon does not mean get well soon in this case. It's more like, I'm watching you and I'll probably kill everybody that you love. Again, way of saying it without saying it, the doublespeak. But what this really is showing is Lily and Sergei and Jamie and all the possible choices or universes that they existed in, and what those different relationships looked like. And it was interesting that they all kind of looked the same. Not much was really happening. But there always was little details that changed as we see that not just the like everyday stuff, but we were seeing the progression of their relationships, but all different versions, and how some, Jamie's there, some Sergei's there. This one, Jamie leaves, and getting to see all that. I don't know. Again, it's not really adding anything to the overall story, but it's cementing the ideas of the story and doing it in a really interesting way. And then you put, like some good music over it, like one of those good flowy, like, I don't know, like indie, like an indie band, with that one hit song. That's what this kind of sounds like something from the Garden State soundtrack. If you know what I'm saying, a certain vibe, right? And that's how we start the episode. And before that, like, again, I didn't realize that they were telling like a multiversal story in flashback at the time. It took a while. It took basically seeing Katie going through several of them before I caught on that this is what we're doing. And again, of all the different ways to do a flashback episode, again, I expect Alex Garland to give you something unique in a cliche. Now this scene is the one that I struggled with, which is Jamie being tortured by Kenton. What I needed to realize is that, because I'm going, why is he letting this happen to him? He's a scary guy. I've met scary guys, and that was the thing. I was like going, how would if I was in this position and this guy roughed me up in my own house, how would I respond? Now, we do eventually see that there was a bit of a struggle in the bathroom that they're in. There's blood on the toilet. He might have taken a knock to the head, and that's how he got him into the bathtub. And he's probably he's definitely looks very disoriented. But I have to realize, we put ourselves in these characters. So when something happens, like, I wouldn't do that. And you're right, maybe you wouldn't, but then I started to think about Jamie as a character. He's not a tough guy. He's a tech guy. Not everybody is going to react the same way. Some people do get scared. Some people do crumble. Some people would have this happen and feel powerless. And that makes it even scarier and more real that, you know, like sometimes people do get into a situation where they're so scared and you don't even, you know, outside looking in, you go, you know, why didn't you fight back? Well, you know, it's just, you can never know what's going to happen until you're in that person's place. And so that's how I chose to think about this scene where this guy, I feel like he could have fought back, you know, I'm like, why not? Why not? But like, apparently he was just being drowned and being so taken aback and everything that's been going on. He, you know, maybe he feels like he could get shot or stabbed to death by this guy if he makes a move, you know. And I, you know, I'm trying to put myself in here like, man, I'd be jumping up on this guy. And it's like, yeah, well, you're not him. And this is fictional. But this is a really intense scene if you can let that part of it go, or if you can just accept that Kenton is scary to Jamie in this situation, that to the point where he believes he's going to be killed by this man and that he would be powerless to stop it in any way. But it still gives us great dialogue. Because again, if this was me and somebody's trying to tell me you're a puppy dog and you'll do anything she wants, you will come running, you're a little lapdog waiting for her to chuck you a bone. And he's not wrong. And it is pretty cold-blooded shit to say to somebody in this position. Kind of like Jules says in Pulp Fiction, you know, man, I just thought that was some cold-blooded shit to say to a motherfucker right before I put a cap in his ass. But it is like it's all just sent to even put him more off and at ease, and that this guy's in my head, and that it even might make you mad. He might even be saying it to see if he will get a rise out of you, so that he has to test to see if you need to be broken a little bit more. But he tells him that he's CIA, and I'm like, okay, so not only was he like, I don't know, maybe he wasn't a cop then. Sounds like he was Central Intelligence Agency, and I doubt he suddenly just became a beat cop, right? But he tells this Tiananmen Square story, and it's this really brings up some stuff for today, okay? With the protests, because let's date this, right? Let's date this video. It's 5/28/2024, and we've had the protests across the country here in America of students protesting the genocide that's going on in Gaza by Israel, because Hamas has done some terrible things to Israel, really, really, really awful things, and tons of people have been killed in Israel by Hamas terrorists. And then, you know, Israel's response is to basically try to kill every single Palestinian, because, hey, how do you know which ones are the bad guys? And so it's just, we've been watching women and children get murdered here in America every day. I mean, it's not like that's new news, and it's not like Israel Palestine hasn't been a story for like my entire life. And that other places have been doing this all over the world, and that aren't Israel and Palestine, and we turn a blind eye to it, and suddenly we care about this one. But I digress, right? You know, we got to make a stand somewhere, and college students across the country are standing up against the basically wiping out of a people from a people who almost got wiped out themselves. And I don't think that genocide sits well with the average person, and these students are standing up to say something about it. And here now we have the misinformation group of people that like to come in and say, oh, the students are terrorists. The students are against Israel because they obviously support the terrorists. Even though it's plain as the nose on anyone with common sense's face that no, they're just protesting the fact that there's a genocide going on by one side against the other. None of those people are, well, I'm sure there's always a few, because that's the thing. These people always rely on the few rather than the many to make their point. There's and then they try to, exaggerate the numbers of how many people are actually the people that they're trying to, discuss. They'd like to paint them all as this one bad thing. But now we have, people the cops going in and busting up these things. And now I think at least one person has died. And as I think about how proud I am of the students that are doing this and anybody that's protesting all this in this way at this time that we're in, here we see the powers that be trying to crush this stuff. That if it gets too much momentum, does this little protest against Israel and Hamas lead? Where does it cascade out to? Because there's a talk in this episode a lot about things cascading out. And things that get bigger when they're not contained. And how real change could happen in America if we aren't smashed down by the people that don't want change. And that's what's happening here. Like, this could spread out. These protests could spread out to all things. This outrage could go, well, why stop here? It almost happened again. It happened when George Floyd was murdered in front of us. And people took to the streets and they protested for a while anyway. And then winter came and everybody went home. And it's not like the protests stopped, but we all moved on. This is what happens. And here we are at this like precipice again of like some real change could happen. We've got people at the end of their collegiate years walking out of their own ceremonies. Real change can happen here. And then I hear this Tiananmen Square story that he tells. And he's just basically giving everybody a history lesson in that there were hundreds of thousands of protesters in China. People saying, oh my God, this could really change, things in China. So what happens? How did these protesters, how did this movement suddenly get stopped? Because the jackboots came in with tanks and started killing everybody. And as he puts it, they put the throat, they gripped the revolution by the throat, and they crushed it. Now they did it in communist China with tanks and soldiers. And they haven't done that quite yet. I mean, they did it in the 60s, right? They didn't roll up with tanks anyway, I don't think. I don't know if there were any tanks at any campuses, but there were plenty of soldiers, right? And then people got killed. And I know that, like, bringing that, like, the comparisons up is kind of like, like, of course, yeah, this is just different time period, same thing, different result. And you just keep hoping, though, that one of these times when they try to break us, we keep going. And that's what I would encourage anybody right now is to don't stop just because it's hard. That's what it has to. The harder it gets, the more you're on to something. The more pushback you get, the more you're really on to something. The more they threaten you, the more you're really on to something. But he says everything is containable if you're willing to do what it takes. And that's pretty much all it takes for Jamie. Because he says he's going to kill everyone that he knows. And this is where the real flashbacks basically start. They had to put this scene with, I don't know, maybe they could have, no, this is a pretty linear show considering all the different, going back and looking back and stuff that they do. But this is where the flashback section of the episode starts. And I didn't really know when it was going to end or if it was going to end. So I didn't really break this up into the same kind of segments that I've done in the last couple of videos. Because it just starts with Lily and her dad playing some kind of backgammon type of game, something similar. I don't know. I don't play backgammon, and I couldn't tell from the board if it was something just similar. And this is all stuff that Katie's looking up. So she's going into the past, and I guess presumably to try to understand these people, including Forrest. a little bit better. What knowledge is she trying to find? What is she looking for? I don't know if we ever find out. But in the next episode, I know that Lily and Jamie talk to Katie. So we'll find out. But we also see Sergei meets Lily for the first time in this flashback. I should talk about what Lily and her father were talking about. Like, it was him seeing her potential and how she saw the world and how she felt about things, like even with just playing this game, and how certain moves felt strong. And it was just kind of an interesting way to look into young Lily's mind. Now, the fun thing about the Sergei meeting Lily thing is, yeah, they're sitting there doing the small talk about breakups, and he's like, yeah, I had the same thing, and yada, yada, yada. The thing I liked about this was when he talked about dating apps and how at this time in our lives, this is, if you want to meet somebody, that's basically it. And not just dating, he says. Basically, if you want to meet anyone, you've got to do it online. And man, that's just... it's sad. I mean, I guess in bigger cities, it's kind of like, it's just interesting that we are still we're surrounded by each other, and we're all isolated. We all isolate ourselves in some way. Not everywhere, not all people. Out here in the middle of podunk nowhere, though, you'd think everybody knows everybody here. Yet I don't have hardly, like, I don't know anybody at all, hardly, it seems. But that it just does kind of, it's really depressing to look at it like that. I have been on dating apps, and I said I would never do that. And I actually have never really taken it very seriously. I'll create a profile, and then I'll just look at what's out there and the people and how it all goes about and what you're supposed to do, and how somebody will like you, and then you'll message them, and then they won't ever message you back. And I don't know. It's just really depressing, and it can't be like it feels like we've all just accepted this, and there's progress, and then there's progress, and I just kind of feel like, as far as like interacting with each other, that's where one of the ways I dislike social media is that it just somehow separates us and creates more isolation in a group setting. Like, we're all around each other and we're all alone somehow still. It's just, I don't know. But yeah. Then we go to Jamie looking up Lily's Facebook, and he's seeing all the pictures of her with Sergei. And then we see Sergei saying, I love you, for the first time. And that was a really nice, I mean, it was, as an acting scene, it was really cute. It was really nice. It was really well performed. And, I guess, I mean, I could say some things, but like, I don't know. I've said I love you, I think, but I don't know. I don't know if I ever have. I don't even know if I ever been like in love. But maybe once, but I don't know. Is that sad? I don't know. Then we see Forrest meets Katie. I like this scene, especially because, again, there's an actress. Okay, yeah, the actress is named Liz Carr. She's just called the lecturer, but she's been in a bunch of stuff, including Loki lately, and I don't know. I'm looking at The Witcher and Loki and DEVS. I just really find this. She's a very interesting actress, being like, I don't know let me look her up. Okay, she is disabled from the age of 7 owing to arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. Yeah, that's a lot. Those are some words. And has had to use a wheelchair since she was 14. She's also deeply into politics and disabled rights and activism, and she's also an actress. And really like all her performances. I just wanted to point that out. As she was basically goaded to, well, she was actually told to goad Katie's character into being frustrated at this conference because Forrest is really taken by her. He wanted to get a feel of her and what she knows and what she thinks. And as she leaves from this conference, we again see the multiversal thing of all, like, this was a big moment for Katie. This is why she looked it up, is her meeting Forrest, like her leaving that seminar, that lecture, and all the different ways that that could have gone uh, had she not met Forrest or seen Forrest or whatever. And him telling her about, giving her, paying for her college and explaining to her the job and how this for her was like this big moment, but knowing that it was kind of like him giving her the job, him offering the job in college and all that was all kind of started with him pushing her. I don't know. It felt a little fabricated, like a certain scenario, but I think it was just he wanted to see how she'd react. Then we get what it turns out, I guess, is the way things started after he met Katie. And we're just slowly moving forward. So from the last episode when we saw the dead rat on the lab table, this is that, like, their first big experiment of what they were going to be doing. They didn't even really quite understand what they were doing. And it was how they have all these objects on the table and the dead rat at the center. And it's like when they say it works, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this that I'm not even going to pretend to understand. Okay. The science, I'd have to really sit down and do that kind of research. And as much as I love talking about this show, and I do look things up and I take my notes and I do all kinds of deep thoughts on things, I'm not doing this. So it's just basically the first time that it succeeds, they say, and that they could start going outwards, which means going backwards. And it's pretty interesting because this is where they start including in the lecture talking about superposition and this how this is like you're here and you're not. You could be dead and alive, and this all is about like multiversal stuff again. And we get to see that the big moment for Forrest when he lost his daughter and how that happened and how this drives him. And we see now also, like, why is he looking into this? Because he's, as Katie puts it, this is like your judge and jury. This whole thing is you trying to absolve yourself or damn yourself. Meaning that if the machine works, if what we're trying to do works, it means that everything was predetermined and that your wife or your daughter was always going to die in that accident. And there was nothing you could do about it. But if it doesn't work, that means there were choices and things could have happened differently. And that's where that multiversal thing comes up, which is why he doesn't like it, because he wants one answer. But the answer really, I mean, to me, is that it's choices. He was on the phone with the person in the car because if you were, I always see this all the time of people like talking in their cars and I'm like, who are they talking to? Like, I always think like, who's important enough? How many of us are that important that we have somebody that we have to talk to all the time? And really, it's just because people are constantly looking for communication with each other. And this is how we do it instead of like talking to each other, like straight up. What we're doing right now. Like, I would love to be standing in a room full of people just talking about this show and all of my audience, all my potential audience sitting there listening to me. But instead I'm doing it here. But what is this choice? Like, how is this choice? What am I doing? Like, I'm sitting here right now instead of like possibly going to work. Like, what if I decided right now to stop doing this video and I go, you know what? I told my boss I might come in for a couple of hours today. I better do that. And how that choice could actually change something, because I could get in my car, I could pull out of my driveway and then get smashed by a truck. But by sitting here, nothing is happening. But what does that mean? It means that how do I know what that choice could lead to? Anyway, but we don't think about that. Like, he didn't think about how he's talking to this person that's right down the street. He's literally standing in the road going, yeah, let's have pasta, instead of like even acknowledges, hey, you're going to be here in a second. So, but they still keep on talking, like talking up until the moment that they're standing right in front of each other. And then it's funny, but I think the talking would actually stop. And then that's the end of the communication, because we've already talked about what we're going to do. And then one person goes off and gets the pasta, and the other person takes the kid inside. But that distraction, because to me, it looked like she ran the stop sign. And then when the car comes and just completely, bam, just flings them like a rag doll out of the air. That choice, right? What if they weren't talking on the phone? What if he had let them just arrive? What if they hadn't been talking to each other? Would she have still ran the stop sign? And then, so when he's running down the road, first we see what would have happened if nothing had happened, and she rolls up and gets his kid out of the car, and then we see him running down the road. And again, Nick Offerman's acting in this is incredible. That look on his face when he's imagining, like when he knows what he's running up on, which is the dead people. But seeing all the different ways that the accident could have or couldn't have happened, all happening at the same time. Again, just really interesting, creative ways to film and shoot things and tell a story. I love it. But yeah, he's, like I said, I think he wanted to be proven wrong, and I think that what she says here is this is him trying to, yeah, it's not really. He's hoping for one answer, but he'll accept both, and that they show them using the machine on the rat, and that in the computer the rat is alive. They go backwards and the rat is on the table alive, but the rat was never on the table when it was alive. So how could it be alive? But it also isn't. It's just crazy, because in some universe, I guess you could say that they brought, I don't know. We know that Jamie, and this is where I guess the flashbacks end, where Jamie tries to get his family to safety, tells them the lie that it's the NSA. That not that the NSA are trying to kill them, but that a foreign agency knows their information, and that's how they get to safety. And then we cut to Kenton telling Forrest and Katie, "I'm not going to prison." All this shit that we're doing here, I had to kill a guy, put a girl in psychiatric ward, and basically scare the bejesus out of a guy, our friend, so bad that he thinks we're gonna kill him and kill his whole family. And that if I ever feel the heat coming, well, I'm gonna be acting in self-interest. So I guess he's not dying of lung cancer, but he does know who he's fucking with, but he says he won't be fucked with. And that's pretty much where where he leaves it, right? He doesn't have to say anymore. But they tell him he tells them that Lily Chan is a threat, and to him that means he's got to do something about it. But they say it's not in your power to kill Lily Chan. But he doesn't understand what she's saying to him. He thinks maybe you're saying I can't kill her, but she's saying no, you can't, because it's not in your power. Meaning she's seen it and you don't. So don't bother with it. But I don't think that's how Kenton's going to let that go. And right here at the end, we do see a flashback of Lily and her dad's in the hospital. And he tells her, no man ever steps in the same river twice, because it's not the same river, it's not the same man. And that this isn't some ancient Chinese secret. It's Greek. And the Greeks came up with this. And it's pretty standard if you really think about it. You can't do something twice in the same exact way, because you're not the same person. And in a river that's constantly flowing, it's never going to be the same river. You and the river are always changing and moving. and it will never be the same experience twice. Or even if you could rewind it, you'd step in, it would still be different. And that was his like posit to her, was think about that. And she does. Because then we see like a bit of flashing around of Lily dying in DEVS. But then it switches to Jamie sneaking into the window of the psychiatric place, which I don't know. I guess a lot of people sneaking into people's windows in the show. But she's all doped out and she's like, I love you. And he's like, no, you don't. I wish you did, but you don't. That's just drugs talking. As he gets her out of the psychiatric ward. And then we cut to Katie, who's seeing this, presumably. And she has this weird kind of smile on her face. And you could say, oh, that's sweet. You know, like this is what she wants, right? She's happy because maybe this is something that's not predetermined. Maybe this is something that they didn't see. Or maybe it is exactly what they see. And this is exactly the way it's supposed to go. And that's why. Like when you go, how the hell is Lily going to end up in DEVS and die in 48 hours when she's in the psych ward? Well, love. His desire to get her out of there, she might have actually been safer in the psych ward in the end. She wouldn't have her answers, and maybe Forrest and them would complete and accomplish their goals, but she'd be alive. So anyway, and that's how the episode ends. So another fantastic episode to talk about. I honestly can't believe I didn't think I'd talk this long about it. I keep thinking, as I was writing my notes, I was like, I don't know if I got enough here, but I do. And I have faith that the next one will be just the same, but we'll see. So I want to thank everybody that watches these. I want to thank everybody that watches in the future, in the past, whatever timeline we're on, whatever universe we're in. Be good to each other out there, everybody. And we will be back with episode 6 pretty soon. Have a good one.